This is the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, one of New York's most controversial roads, and it's falling apart. Chunks of cracked concrete are dropping into the street. Parts of it may not even survive the next decade. Trucks are already banned from certain sections because it can't handle their weight. Built over a period of almost 30 years in the mid-20th century, the BQE was designed for a simpler time. It's not meant to handle the volume of cars it sees daily. It's become a massive problem in the city, with no meaningful solution in sight. But this isn't just a New York problem. All over the country, our infrastructure is crumbling. Freeways and bridges are falling apart and being replaced with more freeways. As public transit is ignored and funding is cut, cities all over are locked into a cycle of car dependence that goes back decades. This didn't happen by accident, though. Highways tearing apart neighborhoods designed to funnel vehicle traffic from the suburbs to the job center with little regard for the people who live there. This became the model of American city design. But life in America wasn't always this way. Cities cut apart with massive freeways and poor planning can be traced back to one man, Robert Moses, the unelected bureaucrat who changed the face of New York City and all of North America with his iron-fisted grip on the levers of power. And honestly, Robert Moses kinda sucks.
First, to build these roads, you have to move a lot of people's homes, don't you, sir?
Yes, especially in urban communities, in urban and suburban communities. That is one of the big problems.
Could you give us any indication of how many homes will have to be moved in building the New York Thruway?
Well, the New York Thruway is, I would say, 3/4 of it is in open territory where there's no problem. The other 1/4, I wouldn't know how many, but in New York City, on the approaches, I would say that there are about 10,000 people.
Do you remember the last time I saw you and you asked me if I thought you were a good person deep down?
Do I remember that? Yeah, vaguely.
You really caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say.
Well, do you think I'm a good person deep down?
He was not a good person, deep down. Robert Caro, the author of The Power Broker, that 1,300-page Bible on the life and times of Moses, once described him as, quote, the most racist man he had ever met. Moses had a disdain for immigrant communities, non-white communities, and working-class communities.
This is the city that Robert Moses built. New York and the area around it was a very different place before Robert Moses arrived.
If you scroll past this TikTok, what are you doing? You see there was an animator, and this animator was messing around, right? And out of nowhere, he suddenly created a picture of a minion who died on the cross. And this minion even had a crown of thorns and nails in his hands. But I need you to listen to me. A minion didn't die for your sins, but you know who did?
Was it Jesus, Bob?
No, it wasn't fucking Jesus, Gilmore, for fuck's sakes. It was, Little Syria. I blew it up to build the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. I built this city's for you, Paige, brick by brick. When I'm clearing slums, yeah, I'm bumping that. Tearing down your house, yeah, I'm bumping that. 365 Planner Boy.
Bumping that.
Should we build a little road, add another lane, wanna build real wild?
Yeah, I'm bumping that.
Meet me on the Cross Bronx if you're
bumping that.
365 Planner Boy.
Bumping that.
American Urban Renewal, plow away the residue, push the pores out. I look hot when I'm
bumping that.
While he did build many beneficial public works projects like parks, beaches, and playgrounds that are enjoyed by millions today, he intended those to only be used by certain types of people.
It was Robert Moses who built Kennedy Airport and Co-op City and 600 playgrounds in New York. And when Robert Moses built bridges, he built the roads that led to them. When he built housing units, he built the parks around them. He gained a power unseen before, a power to build what he felt the city needed. He was afraid of no one. He battled the poor of the West Side and the rich of Long Island. And in the end, Robert Moses always won.
Why did Robert Moses always win? How did he amass such great power without ever once being elected to public office? In an article for The New Yorker in 1974, Robert Caro wrote, Robert Moses first obtained power during the 1920s by seeing the potential for power where other men had not. Now, in the 1930s, Robert Moses wanted to extend his influence into New York City, where he would need power of new, even greater dimensions, and he was beginning to focus on another humble institution, the public authority. Everybody knew that the real power behind anything in New York was always Robert Moses. He was able to take over obscure, lesser-known institutions like the Parks Department and planning commissions and amass a number of different job titles that on their own didn't really mean much. Moses was a close advisor and friend of New York Governor Al Smith. Under Smith, he was appointed president of the Long Island State Parks Commission, a title he held until 1964. He convinced Governor Smith to create this commission after drawing out maps of proposed state parkways designed to bring motorists from the suburban and urban areas of Long Island to the region's many parks. Seriously, this guy would have loved playing city skylines. While holding this office, he even served as New York's Secretary of State for 2 years, appointed by none other than Al Smith. Those two dudes were like this, best buddies. Classic cronyism. Smith went on to run for president on the Democratic ticket in 1928, but lost in a landslide to Herbert Hoover, and we all know how that went.
On October 29th, Black Tuesday, the bottom dropped out and the market crashed. Jobs, savings, and homes were wiped out. The Great Depression was here.
After a single term of the failed presidency... Stop! Why are you running around like this as soon as I start recording? She's a handful. After a single term of the failed presidency of Herbert Hoover, which resulted in Central Park being turned into a shantytown nicknamed Hooverville, another prominent New Yorker, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was elected in a landslide. With it came the New Deal, which included federal funding for massive public works projects across the country. It was in his ability to secure much of this funding, which helped create much needed jobs for the city. Robert Moses was able to further elevate his own power. This was the start of our friend Bobby becoming more than just a parks guy. He had his eyes on the whole city. Robert Moses was first appointed at the city level by Mayor LaGuardia in 1933 when he successfully convinced the mayor to merge the parks departments of the 5 boroughs into a single unified city parks authority, with him at the helm. With this power, he began to shape the city of New York and its outer suburbs in his own image. One of his most prominent signature projects was the Triborough Bridge, a massive highway and bridge project linking Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens together, allowing vehicle traffic easy access to all 3 boroughs. The scope of the project was so large that Robert A. Caro wrote of it in The Power Broker. Its approaches, the masses of concrete in which cables would be embedded, would be as big as any pyramid built by an Egyptian pharaoh. Its roadways wider than the widest roadways built by the Caesars of Rome. Having his signature project compared to the works of the pharaohs and Caesars is so on brand for Daddy Moses. And at the time, it truly was one of the most innovative works of highway engineering the world had ever seen. The bridge had 3 sections going to each of the boroughs, connected by a large interchange on Randall's Island, splitting off in the middle in a 2.5-mile-long elevated viaduct. It was first planned way back in 1916, but it took another 13 years to finalize plans and get approval for funding. The Great Depression called that into question. The project was estimated to cost $24 million, and in 1932, the city comptroller Charles W. Berry recommended the construction of the bridge be canceled, as New York was facing a massive budget deficit. But in 1933, after the election of President Roosevelt, a committee chaired by Robert Moses was able to secure the blessing of the federal government to sell bonds worth up to $35 million to fund the project through creating an independent Triborough Bridge Authority under the direct control of good old Bobby Moses. You may be seeing a pattern here. Through the TBA, Moses was able to convince Governor Herbert H. Lehman to pass bills allowing him to clear land in the Bronx to create the initial bridge approach. With a deadline of August 1936 given by the Federal Department of War, who helped oversee the project, the TBA got to work. They were again able to lobby the government for over $40 million to complete this project. In April of 1934, work began clearing land and demolishing homes and businesses in Harlem and the Bronx to build the highway approaching the bridge. Over 300 buildings in total were demolished against the wishes of residents, who were evicted with little to no notice or compensation, with Robert Moses and his associates simply ignoring their protests. These residents were majority working class Black and Latino families who had lived in the city for generations. There are even stories of him ordering his construction crews to tear down buildings from top to bottom, with families still living in the lower levels, watching their home slowly meet its demise. His disregard for the communities he built in was intentional and hostile.
Haters claim that this video is AI generated or a clever editing trick, but it actually is real. I know because I designed that beautiful interchange below. The woman wakes up and the floor falls out of her apartment because I demolished it to add an additional elevated viaduct to city. She was so surprised and scared. But little did she know, I take pleasure in seeing my enemies completely defeated like this. But sadly, the woman had a plan. She tried to construct a small pedestrian bridge over the space where her floor used to be. Being the merciful planner that I am, I allowed her to complete her journey and in exchange for the remainder of her building, which will be turned into a 14-story elevated parking lot. I hope she's watching this and knows that her service to the greater good will be forgotten immediately, and she will be forced to move to Ohio, Xiaohongshu.
Moses simply saw these residents as nothing more than collateral damage in the quest to carry out his own vision for the city of New York. Although Moses claimed the bridge would help alleviate traffic, it did the opposite in one of the earliest cases of induced demand. The bridge itself ended up creating significant demand for more cars, especially once the connecting Brooklyn-Queens Expressway was built, which itself led to the displacement of countless residents, increased air pollution, and disconnecting neighborhoods with massive ribbons of concrete and steel. But what the hell, they look cool as fuck on the map, so who could blame him? It was through the creation of this bridge that Robert Moses showed the nation that he could get things done, and get them done ahead of schedule. The Triborough Bridge was dedicated and opened to traffic in July of 1936, 1 month early. No, but seriously, can you imagine if California could have done that with its high-speed rail? For all of his faults, at least he got shit done. You win some, you lose some, I guess.
My experience has been that many of the people, by no means all, who call themselves planners, are people who make pretty pictures. They draw things. They present a plausible and often dramatic, melodramatic program, but they're not people that get anything done.
And then inner cores of cities, the business districts, the downtown, the sort of hip, trendy urban areas, those are either seen as places to get to work, places you commute to, or if you're young, a place like Brooklyn or the city I live in, Oakland in California, they're seen as two things. A place of transition where young people come to be cool, to get in the arts, to start their career, to meet a partner, and then move off into the suburbs. Or they're seen as dangerous. They're seen as scary, inner city, full of drugs, homelessness, crime. They're never seen as home to the aspirational American. That is more the other way. Having a car with a 2-car garage, pile of kids, all that. And there's no real in-between. It's all either or. And generally, big cities aren't treated in American culture as like, oh, this is like a great place to raise a family. This is a great place to walk, a great place to live. No. Unfortunately, that's most of society, but who made it that way? Who made these decisions? And who decides how our environments are designed, what they're used for? This is usually more than just one person. It's usually a complex web of individuals, government officials, private developers, even just people who vote with their feet by moving to the suburbs versus the city, or people who choose a certain lifestyle. But not always. Sometimes these decisions are literally made top-down by powerful people who believe that one more lane, in fact, will fix traffic. And one such planner who subscribed to the one more lane ideology was based right out here in New York. It was none other than the late, great Robert Moses.
What if New York City was New Freak City, and instead of building freeways, we built freakways, and instead of bulldozing poor and minority neighborhoods to build them, we installed a giant iPad playing skibidi toilet edits at the top of the Empire State Building? What if we replace the subway with Subway Surfers and require every bodega to sell copies of the original edition of Hillbilly Elegy with the couch part left in? And what if Brooklyn was Jelklin and everyone was required to take mandatory Jelking lessons to live there? Instead of the Bronx, it was called the Blocks, short for Roblox, and the only currency they accept there is Robux. What if Queens was named Chappelle Roan instead, because she's the only queen I recognize? Man, Manhattan is problematic, so we call it they-them-hattan, and Staten Island is called Sigma Island, and you have to work at least 420 hours a week to live there, and what if we change the Statue of Liberty to the Statue of Ligma?
Mr. Moses, I think myself and the folks at home are wondering, what is Ligma?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah, so obviously that's not actually Robert Moses speaking. It's an AI voice clone of him, but essentially the idea... It's so stupid. He's using sort of a lot of Gen Z slang, a lot of internet sort of TikTok humor and pop culture references of the modern world to kind of discuss his desire to reshape New York to his will and reshape it for generations. And sort of his legacy is in the city as a whole. It resonates today. I mean, his projects did displace countless homes and businesses of mostly immigrant, people of color, working class neighborhoods. These homes and businesses were destroyed solely out of the belief that we should facilitate the movement of these sort of middle upper class commuters from the suburbs like Long Island or Connecticut into Manhattan, into any other job center to sort of get to their high paying finance jobs where they can drive their car and have that luxury and park where they want, while the poors are stuck taking the subway.
The great man theory, the 19th century idea that historical events are shaped by a few exceptional, powerful individuals. You know, the types that come around once in a generation and leave their mark on the world around them at a civilizational scale. Honestly, the great man theory is disputed and controversial, and it misses a lot of other factors surrounding historical events. But one such figure who embodies the spirit of the great man theory is Robert Moses.
Robert Moses was a man even presidents feared. Franklin Roosevelt tried to have him removed from power by special order, but he too failed. Robert Moses has been praised as the man who got things done and damned as the man who didn't care what it took to get them done. And this is the centerpiece of the empire that Robert Moses built, the Triborough Bridge. It was this bridge and the authority Robert Moses commanded that made so much possible.
Has it all been fun for you?
What's that?
Has it all been fun?
Oh, a lot of it has been, sure. I once dreamed that I was a butterfly, fluttering around happily, doing as I please, sipping nectar from flowers in a beautiful meadow. When all of a sudden I awoke in a cold sweat, I found that I was not and never had been a butterfly.
Mr. Moses, I'm not sure I'm following you here. What exactly does this have to do with your work in New York City?
Upon awakening, I realized I was Robert Moses. While drafting up plans to build the Triborough Bridge, I was grateful to be Robert Moses and not the butterfly, because the butterfly would never bulldoze historic ethnic enclaves to expand the city's highway system, and that made me sad. But I then asked myself, how can I be certain that last night I was Robert Moses dreaming he was a butterfly, but what if today I am the butterfly dreaming he is Robert Moses?
Bob, you could say that the constant flux between dream state and awakening leads the self to being unaware of this distinction.
There is a necessary difference between Robert Moses and the butterfly. This transformation of self and consciousness begs the question, is any of the work I did to make New York City the powerhouse it is today actually real? Or is it all the delusions of a butterfly gone mad?
We got Robert Moses thinking he's a butterfly before GTA 6.
Oh, and he certainly was a little butterfly gone mad. My good buddy, Bobby Moses, had so much power that he was able to find the fine print in decades-old laws and make anything he wanted possible. If anybody challenged his authority, he could find some sort of legal justification to shut them the hell up or pay them off. He controlled so much money, so many levers of power, that he basically went unchecked. But the problem is, when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, you get Robert Moses's greatest nemesis, Madam Jane Jacobs.
Some things are said so often that nobody thinks of what they mean anymore. For instance, for years we've been hearing, take the children off the street. Suppose we actually let the sidewalks do the job that they can do best. And suppose we stop trying to provide poor substitutes for them.
And yet the more roads that are built, the worse traffic becomes. Something is wrong there.
Jane points out that traffic engineers tell you that traffic is like water, right? It flows in one way, and if you block that flow, then it's going to flow in another way, right? But you find that not to necessarily be true.
No, the evidence shows it's not true.
It takes about as many planners, I think it would, to decommission all these regulations that make it illegal for people to work at home, make it illegal to mix perfectly good things together, that make it illegal to have narrower streets than the great big wide ones that the suburbs are full of, for instance.
It was in Jane Jacobs that Robert Moses finally met his match. In the 1960s, drunk with power and fresh off of his many successful projects, Moses began to work on what would be his magnum opus, the Lower Manhattan Expressway. It was to be a 10-lane elevated viaduct cutting through the West Village, potentially demolishing Washington Square Park and cutting apart neighborhoods like Soho and Little Italy. It was in this environment that a young Jane Jacobs became involved in her community. She was not a planner or politician by profession. Her major at Columbia University was general studies, basically meaning she just took classes in whatever the hell she wanted to. She worked odd jobs and did freelance writing, and eventually wrote the book The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Her philosophy was directly contrary to the ideas of the powerful Robert Moses. She coined terms like eyes on the street to describe how mixed-use walkable neighborhoods built at a human scale help keep streets safer with everyone through what she described as natural surveillance. She was critical of the methods of people like Robert Moses for his heavy-handed, top-down approach to planning, and argued instead for citizens to take the initiative to create the cities they wanted to live in. Although she held no political power, she organized her neighbors into a committee to stop the construction of the Lower Manhattan Expressway. Long story short, Jacobs and her neighbors were able to find their own ways to use the law to stop this project. She was able to get a judge to force public hearings on highway construction. She made a point to show up and protest at every single one of these, becoming a thorn in the side of good old Bobby Moses. Her belief was that for too long, he had created development that favored cars over people, and that he needed to be stopped. And in the end, even after being arrested in 1968, Jane Jacobs won. The project was canceled, dealing a blow to the all-powerful juggernaut that was Robert Moses. However, she wasn't the first to stand up to him. In every neighborhood he tried this in, there was resistance. But Greenwich Village and the other neighborhoods in the path of the proposed expressway skewed a bit heavier towards middle-class, mostly white New Yorkers. Whereas the BQE was built and displaced thousands, the West Village was spared the same fate. But that's a whole other issue.
Are you fucking seeing this, chat? New York, my beloved. The Brooklyn-Queens Expressway built by my bestie, Daddy Robert Moses. He grinded this shit out for like 30 years. My boy was low-key aura farming the way he deleted building after building to bring this iconic highway to the people of the outer boroughs. Listen, twin, 60 years after its completion, the amount of cars this bitch moves is still massive. Some people say it's falling apart and they want to rebuild it. But you can't mess with perfection.
Bobby ate and left no crumbs when he designed this highway. He used it to connect his signature project, the Triborough Bridge at Randall's Island. There was nothing performative about this man. Entire city blocks were torn apart piece by piece, all because this legend decided that maybe Puerto Ricans would be happier living in Yonkers or some shit. Not our problem. But God forbid he mess with my backyard. Daddy Moses really fell off when he met me. This man was down bad. But the second you piss off a bunch of white hipsters is the day you're gonna have to plop that freeway down somewhere else. Lil bro, why do you think Manhattan doesn't have a freeway going through Greenwich Village? That's right, babe. You can thank me for this. Maybe the traffic ain't nice, but at least you can walk these historic streets and grab a slice of pizza while you're at it.
And that's how the story usually ends. Jane Jacobs wins, Robert Moses loses, and he retires into obscurity like the jerk everyone thinks he is. She may have defeated him in Manhattan, but across America and beyond, thousands of little Robert Moseses were already hard at work. City planners, highway engineers, state transportation departments, all praying at the altar of the highway god, their master, Daddy Robert Moses. Yeah, that's right. The shit this dude did reached far and wide. In Los Angeles, the 10 and 110 freeways cut through Sugar Hill, Chavez Ravine, and Highland Park. In New Orleans, he was commissioned to create a plan to widen many of the city's arterial roads, adding extra lanes, culminating in the construction of the elevated Claiborne Expressway, which cut through some of the city's most historic neighborhoods. And this was repeated all across North America, and his ideas on urban design won out in the end. Just look at a map of any US or Canadian city, and you're gonna see Robert Moses's grubby little fingerprints all over it.
The long arc of history does not bend towards justice. History is unwritten, can be revised and rewritten. Your legacy sanitized, paved over with a parking lot. A big, beautiful parking lot. You may be a New York 6, but to me, you're a San Francisco 10. Your performance was flawless, Queen. Jaffe would be proud. Your legacy sanitized, out of your control and in the hands of the masses. You would have loved wearing a labubu on your belt, sipping matches under the BQE, listening to Claro through wired headphones. You would have loved quoting feminist literature to just another girl on the subway. There is no good or evil, only cause and effect. Be ready for the effects, babe, because they're going to be beautiful. Your legacy sanitized. Your legacy sanitized, revised, revitalized.
While some cities are making efforts to undo his legacy, in most others, the car is still king. And more of these projects are being planned and built every goddamn day. But what about our old friend, the BQE? Well, it's still one of New York's busiest highways, and unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult to fix. Like most other crumbling highways across the continent, the best way to repair it is just to make it less useful. It's that simple. Sure, there are safety measures that can be put in place to give it a few more decades of life, and it is a crucial corridor for trucking, so it needs to be there. But at the end of the day, we need to rethink our relationship to our built environment and move away from the car-first approach of people like Robert Moses and into practices that accommodate all forms of development and travel. Look, I don't claim to have all the answers or really even know much about any of this shit. Like Jane Jacobs, I'm not qualified to practice planning. Whatever, and I don't plan to. I'm just some dumb bitch with a microphone and a cute little Labubu hat, and for some reason, you were dumb enough to click the subscribe button. And now, people listen to me. But you know what? We, as people who live, work, and are on the ground in cities, have the power to decide what kind of place we want to live in. And hopefully, we can make our voices heard to prevent the next generation of people like Robert Moses from taking over and making it worse. Or you know what? Just add one more lane, bro. It actually looks pretty cool, and suburbs are kind of sick. Like, have you ever been to a frickin' Costco? Hell yeah, dude. Let's do it.